Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, a podcast wherein I interview performers, promoters, fans and most especially comedians about what comedy actually is and what it means to them, through shows they've seen, through their own experiences, or if they wish, through expressive dance, although I appreciate that might not work on an audio medium. In full disclosure, I should say this is the first of 2 episodes, because I realised this ceased to be an interview quite early on, and was in fact a discussion about comedy between 2 friends, perhaps in rocking chairs, maybe by a fireplace. And in all honesty, we just kept talking. I don't know anyone who makes you feel that comfortable that quickly more than stand-up comedian Rich Wilson.
Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good, you?
Yeah, really good. Great to see you.
And you, mate.
We can just jump right in if you're happy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, brilliant. How did you make your start in comedy? And more than that, how you stay in comedy?
The staying bit is becoming more and more difficult as we go along. But getting into it, I never in a million years thought I'd be a stand-up comedian. I never had any thoughts about it. It used to fill me with dread. Whenever I'd read an interview with a comic or someone famous and they used to talk about stand-up comedy and they go, it's the hardest thing in the world. Just the thought of it used to make me want to puke. I was like, I couldn't think of anything worse. I'm quite a shy person, so comedy has helped me with that. It's helped my confidence no end.
Yeah.
It's because it's still like I can't make phone calls. I hate making phone calls. I have to walk around the room about 20 times and then just go, just do it, just make the call. Because I'm just terrified of it. But so to be stood in front of strangers trying to make them laugh is bananas. But I worked up the creek in Greenwich.
Yeah.
And I used to love comedy. I'm the oldest one in my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have any sort of influences from older siblings. But I had my next door neighbour, Alan and Tommy Costin, and Julie as well, actually. Julie was more about music. They were, but I sort of they felt like family. And they used to sort of just get their hand-me-down clothes and albums. They used to tell me about all these things. Like, remember Julie telling me about Toya, when I was a kid. And then my next door neighbour Alan gave me a cassette of Eddie Murphy, Delirious. Mm-hmm. And he just said, he goes, oh, take this. And I remember going home and he just said, there's loads of swearing on it, So I'm like, right. So I had this stereo that my dad had given me. And then another one's with a cassette on it as well.
Yeah.
It sounded amazing. And I had headphones on in my bedroom and I put Eddie Murphy on. And honestly, I had never heard anything like it in my life. It just took my head off. Because up until then, it had been Mike Yarwood and, sort of very, very light entertainment, Cannonball, Morecambe and Wise. And you sort of, Billy Connolly was kind of the edgiest, but even that was like the edgiest it could get,
Yeah.
So to hear someone like that talking about the things that he did, it just blew me away. And so, and then I got a mate of mine, Tom, and I've known Tom since I was 3. Like, we're still mates now. Mm. And Tom, there's only a couple of months difference, but Tom always felt like an older brother as well. And he would always, I remember him saying, have you heard of this guy, Lee Evans? Have you heard of this guy, Bill Hicks? And he introduced me to all these things and hip hop and things like that. So I had all those influences going on. And then I remember talking to someone about Eddie Murphy, and then they went, well, that's Richard Pryor. And I'm like, what? The dude from Superman 3? They're like, yeah, he's one of the finest comedians that's ever lived. And I'm like, really? So I remember going back and finding old recordings. I can't remember where I found them. But listening to old recordings of him and going, what is this? There was the videos, Live from Sunset Strip or whatever it is, and they were still around. So I remember watching them and just going, wow. And then from that, you find out about Lenny Bruce and you find out about Cosby back in the day, Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart is a huge influence. I love Bob Newhart so much. The inventor of that one-sided conversation. Like on the phone. So the driving instructor is one of the best things that's ever been written. So all of these things kind of were gathering up. And I didn't really realise it. I was like, I just loved comedy. And then I remember once being out with Tom and a few others from school. And we used to play this game with an American football. We used to just throw it at each other. I remember we were all bundling, and I can't remember what I said, but the whole pile of boys just fell apart laughing. And I just hit this rhythm, and everything I said, they just could not stop laughing. And I thought, that feels amazing. But I didn't, again, I was like, I like to make people laugh. That was it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until working up the creek. I remember I'd just come out of a breakup, really horrible breakup with a girl, Kate. And I was working at Funeral Directors as well. And it was January 2001. It was bleak. It was bleak, man. And I'm like, this is shocking. I need something. And I remember sitting in the canteen at the Funeral Directors. I just happened to be flicking through the local paper, and there was a full page advert for bar staff at Up the Creek. And I'd never even seen it. The girl Kate that I'd been hanging around with, I remember she telling me about it as she'd been. And I'd been to the Comedy Store back in like 1998, and I'd seen Bill Bailey and people like that, but I didn't know there was a circuit of just, comics you'd never heard of.
Right.
So I rang up as soon as I saw, and bearing in mind, I've just said to you, I don't like making phone calls. I went, I'm ringing that, I'm making that phone call. So I rang, and I went, and I don't know who I spoke. I found out later it was Drew, one of the owners, and he said, right, he goes, come and see me tomorrow night. He goes, be here 7:30. All right, cool. So I get there, and he walks me in. He meets me outside. I walk in. He goes, right, this is where the comedy is. We're in the main room. He goes, this is where it all happens in here. He goes, all the people come in and blah blah blah. He walked me through to the bar. And he went, this is the bar. He goes, these have been the people. He goes, can you pull a pint? I went, yeah. I said, I used to work at the Lazy Toad in Beckenham a couple of years ago. And he went, all right. He goes, cool. I'll see you tomorrow. And that was it. So that was the Friday. Yeah. And he said, you're welcome to sit and, stay and watch the comedy if you wish. He goes, but we'll see you tomorrow night. And I was like, what was that? That's it. The whole thing lasted from me walking into the front door to the bar. And then that was it. That was the end of the interview.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, all right. And I remember I watched a bit of the comedy. Daniel Kitson was emceeing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, straight away, I was like, I'm so excited. This is going to be amazing. And that was it. So the next day I turn up, I start my shift, and it became one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was amazing. Mm. And then I got sort of friendly with comedians coming through and having conversations with them, like Michael Smiley, Silky, Rob Rouse, Steve Hughes. All these people would come through. And then I remember Rob Rouse one day he goes, you should do this. I think you'd be good at this. I'm like, I don't know about that. He went, no. He goes, what he said was, you've got a glint in your eye. I think you'll be able to do it. I was like, all right, maybe. So that sort of sowed the seed. I didn't really think much of it. And I became friends with Silky, and he and I used to hang out together. And I remember sitting in this nightclub in Maidstone, because I used to run up the creek when it was in Maidstone. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting in this nightclub with him, having a few drinks, and he just said, we got talking about it, and he said, your first gig is going to be on this date in October. It's in 2 months' time, and you can't back out. And I was like, right. So I spent 2 months shitting my pants. And that's it. That was me doing comedy. And so I just sort of fell into it. I didn't have any aspirations or any dreams of being a comic. It just ended up that way. It was obviously meant to be. Frightening.
Yeah.
Madness.
And it's interesting because you mentioned Silky there, Paul White.
Yeah.
He's a really nice guy, a super fine, generous man. I would say that you are a very generous and modest man yourself. Is that why you hang out together? Do birds of a feather flock together? Is that how it is on the circuit? Yeah,
we do. When it started, I think he saw me as sort of a project, very much a sort of Eliza Doolittle kind of thing. I think, when we first met, I hadn't really experienced much of the world. I was a dad at 20. So I was kind of just doing jobs just to make sure the kids were sorted out. And then, so I hadn't really experienced much of the world. And then I met him, and he kind of tapped into what I knew was in me. Like, I grew up surrounded by good music, by literature. My dad was a huge reader. So there were always books everywhere. My mum and dad were always into music. So that we weren't shut off from things. But I think when you're a teenager and you're growing up, you go with what's fashionable and what your mates are into. So you become quite closed off to a lot of stuff. And I think meeting him sort of unlocked it unlocked it. And I was like, yeah, I want to start doing that. I want, it gave me the confidence to start being more honest with what I was into and the things I wanted to read and the films I wanted to watch. And
yeah,
he and I, we're very much like R2D2 and C3PO, like exactly what we're like, and it really makes me laugh. And I got to thank him because without him I wouldn't be doing it. He got me started in this, and he's done that to a lot of people. He does comedy courses, and he's helping people come out of their shell. I've seen some of the people on his courses, and they're all the people that they're quite socially awkward. They're quite socially inept. They haven't. They're good people, but they just haven't had a chance to get involved with other people. Or they can't for whatever reason, and he kind of brings them all together, and it becomes more of a social club rather than just a comedy course. It's a really nice thing that he does.
Yeah.
So he and now what's happened is it's kind of flipped. So now I'm kind of teaching Silky how to be a bit more at one with the world. Sometimes I'm like, mate, because he'll walk through Leeds on a Saturday night and he's got his hat and he's got greetings. You're like, mate, you're going to get your head punched in. Don't be saying greetings in a kebab shop on a Saturday night in Leeds. So now we've like flipped and we're kind of teaching each other the ways of the world. But he's a good lad, yeah, Paul, funny boy. Yeah, we've been very pissed many times.
Lovely.
Yeah,
I remember I was at the Black Horse in Ayleston.
Oh, great gig! I love that gig.
Fantastic place.
That gig. He's one of the best in the country.
I saw him 2019, a part of the Leicester Festival, doing a show there. I come out of the show and I'm waiting for a cab back into town, and he pulls up alongside me in his car and offers me a ride back into town. Don't know me from Adam. Never met me before. It's like, where you go? You go back to town? Do you want a lift? I'm like, genuinely, I've got a cab like 2 minutes away, but I thought that's generosity. Just stop to a guy in the street. I thought I could have been anybody. In fairness, I mean, if you look at me, I really couldn't have been anybody, but you know what I
mean. He's a funny one. I remember he was on the phone and he's in his car. It was in a car. He used to have this VW Jetta, a Bora, that's what it was. And it had kind of like a body kit on it, which is quite unusual for him. And he's on the phone and I could hear him talking. I went, who are you talking to? And he went, there's a car that they want me to pull over and have a chat about the car. I went, don't pull over. Keep going. What are you doing? They're going to nick your car. So sometimes he's quite naive. He goes, they want to have a chat. I'm like, no, mate. They're going to jack your car. But yeah, bless him. He's a good lad. And that pub in Ayleston, run by beautiful, beautiful people, is just, it's a fantastic gig. And they love comedy so much. It really makes a difference when you go to a venue and the people behind the venue give a shit about the gig that's on. It makes so much difference. It's beautiful. And I will gig for them whenever. I'd die for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to the Laughter Loft.
Bloody right.
Yeah. And what you're saying now, I know exactly what you mean, because I've been to, many hundreds of gigs. And some places you go to, like the Black Horse, and they're completely behind the comedy. They love it. That's what they're all about.
Yeah.
And I've been to other gigs, even quite recently, where you don't even know the gig is on.
No.
It has to travel by word of mouth, because all they've got is like a board inside the pub or whatever, and you're going, "Well, have you got comedy? Don't know."
Yeah.
And like, it's nothing on your website. It's nothing on your Insta or anything. No. And you're like,
this is the
no
thing.
one knows.
If the venue's behind it, it works so well, and it's a shame because sometimes there's a gig I did last night for Comedy Beats, which is Windsor. A guy called Windsor, not the place. And him and his gang, they run some brilliant gigs. And this one's at the Grasshopper, which is in Crawley. And it's one of the best gigs going. I remember doing it a couple of years ago before all the pandemic and that. And I remember turning up, and I said this last night when I was on stage. When you get there, it's a pub on a council estate, and it's next to a parade of shops. It's like a classic council estate pub. And I remember pulling up in the car and looking at it, and I'm like, absolutely not. This is going to be horrendous. What the fuck is this? But I went in, and I went to the gig, and the gig was one of the best gigs in my 18-year career that I have ever done. It was sensational. All the people in there were brilliant. The people in the pub are brilliant. The people that own the pub are brilliant. But what's been happening over the last couple of months people are struggling to afford tickets. So it's kind of dying a little bit. But what's happening is the pub are taking the hit because they're behind the gig.
Yeah.
But they're losing money, and so So last night I was talking to them, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't know if it's going to be here in the new year because they just can't afford. They just can't afford it. They're losing a couple $100 a month, and they're like, we could hire this out for private functions, and so it's a shame that they really want it, but they can't afford it, and that's going to be really interesting in the next couple of months when the energy crisis goes away. It does, and something has to give, but." If anyone's listening to this and you're in the Crawley area, you have to support that gig, the Grasshopper. It's a fucking great gig. It'd be a real shame if it went, But what was it? I can't remember what the question was. What was the question?
I don't know.
Can't remember where we went with that. We just went off on one. Sorry.
Doesn't matter. No, all the better. All the better. If you got something to say, that's what I want to hear. So big up the Grasshopper.
Big up the Grasshopper.
You talked about comedy courses there. That's come up a lot on this podcast, and obviously the one that Silky runs. Have you ever done a course yourself?
Do you know what? When I started, when there was talk of competitions, and I started in 2004, so I started pretty late, and I was 32 when I started, and I remember they were talking about the what is it? So you think you're funny and amuse moose and all that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, surely comedians don't do all that. That's like selling out, I thought, oh, yeah, you're doing competitions, you're selling out. That you just got to keep it pure, right? And same with writing courses, comedy courses. I was like, well, who's doing that? I said, you either know how to do it or you don't, or you learn on the job. You learn how you go.
Yeah.
So I didn't do any of that. And it's not till later on I found out everyone has done a comedy course. Everyone's done the competitions. And I haven't. And I'm like, I made work for myself again. Like Mickey Flanagan, Greg Davis, all of them, Rod Gilbert, Jimmy Carr, loads of people. They've all done comedy courses. I was like, for fuck's sake. I never did it. I did. What did I do? I think I did Amuse Moose, and I didn't get in. And then they messaged me and said, oh, you're going through like a wild card or something like that. But I only ever got as far as like the second round, so I never got anywhere. But yeah, I just made it really hard for myself, like a dickhead. I should have just. I don't know what's wrong with me. I do that all the time. I'm always kicking myself in the nuts when I should be getting on with it. So no, I've never done it. I've been to Silky's. I've sat at the back and watched him.
Yeah,
quite interesting. But yeah, I've never done. I've sort of picked it up as I've gone along. I've done my own course. We had when the lockdowns were happening, and then a few people were saying to me, "You should do a course. You should teach. You'd be able to do it." And it was funny. We got there in the end, and we worked it out, and it was great, and we had a really nice time. But I remember at the beginning when they first talked about it, I'm like, I don't know how I do it. How am I going to tell anyone how to do it? It's because you don't know. You see, it's all everyone's an individual, and you come at it a different way. Like some people will write for 2 hours a day and throw most of it in the bin, and I can't sit and with a blank piece of paper go, right, I'm going to write comedy today. It just doesn't work for me like that. I have to be off washing the car or cleaning the oven or doing something else, like pairing my socks. And then all these ideas are coming, or I'm doing something else. Or I get a lot of ideas from music. I listen to a lot of music and I'll go, oh, that's quite funny. And I'll make a note. And so to be teaching it, it's a tricky one. If someone wants my help, I'll help people now and I'll go, look, we'll have a chat and then we'll figure it out. But to sit and write stuff and then teach someone else how to do it, I find really difficult. So, I think and the thing is, you can't. If you're funny, you're funny. You can't really teach. You could teach someone how to tell a joke. Yeah, like Jimmy Carr and like Bob Monkhouse as well. I was told about. I did a gig with Ted Robbins. Yep, did a gig with Ted Robbins. Ah, mate, what a fascinating dude. He's worked with everyone. So he came in. We was at the Green Room. Was in Stockport for Math Brown off the curb.
Outside the box.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ted Robbins comes in, and I can hear him coming through. Bearing in mind we've never met. I can hear him. He's going, "Is that Wilson? Can I see his form?" And he comes in. He's already got a flute full of champagne. And he comes in, and he's chatting away like we've known, like proper old school lovey, like proper, darling, hello, darling, how are you? Hello, it's a real honour to meet you, Ted. He's like, yes, my boy. And he starts telling me all these stories. All the other young lads, like the young acts that are there, we're all sort of gathered round. He starts telling stories about Les Dawson, about Tommy Cooper, all the greats that he's worked with, and I was like, oh my God, this is like one of the last remaining connections to that old world that we grew up with. Yeah. And then I noticed the other acts kind of went off, and they were sort of chatting in the corner about whatever they were doing. I'm like, you should be talking to this guy. You should be. He was telling me about Les Dawson, Tommy Cooper. He told me about Bob Monkhouse. About Bob Monkhouse used to drink half a bottle of brandy before he went on. How mad is that? Like, what? Did he? He went, yeah, he was battered. Bob Monkhouse didn't know. Bob Monkhouse wasn't naturally funny. Bob Monkhouse he learned how to write and perform jokes.
Yeah.
He learned the timing, but he wasn't necessarily a naturally funny dude. And I found that fascinating that someone like that, someone on that level, like Jimmy Carr, again, not necessarily naturally funny, but a craftsman when it comes to joke writing and delivery. Yeah. So, I've been very lucky to meet these people, and it's when you meet people like that, you go, Jesus Christ. It's amazing, no?
I think that's one of the interesting things, because like you said there about some of the classics, these were people, they wouldn't run around on stage. Their comedy didn't come from physical comedy. It was very much about standing still in front of a microphone and just delivering. And the magic in that delivery means that they're, 50, 60, 70 years later, we still remember them, talking about them with reverence.
Yeah. That ability to stand there and just rely on the words, like you just said, is something that I worry too much about getting to the punchline. I worry about, I don't want to bore people, and so I'm always bouncing around, and I'm quite animated with what I do. But I remember Tom Stade stayed at my house, Canadian comic, and he wasn't working that night. This is when I started, and he goes, what are you doing? I went, well, I've got to go to Staffordshire to do this gig. He goes, well, I'll come with you. He goes, have you got a video camera? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'll come with you, we'll video it. And I'm like, what? Anyway, we do this gig, he videos it. We come back. I was living in this house with my ex-partner, Marilyn. Beautiful woman. Again, she was another one that, without her, I wouldn't be doing comedy. She was so supportive and amazing. She was fantastic. And without her, like I say, I wouldn't have gone on to do what I was doing. And I remember sitting around the fire. We had this like proper fire. We sat around that. And Tom went, right, let's put on your video. I'm like, oh, we don't have to watch it now. And he's like, yeah, we'd had a few beers. He's like, yeah, let's put it on. So we sat and we watched it, and it wasn't great. it was all right. I was an open spot, so it was all right. It was what it was. And then he went, right, let's put on Richard Pryor. And I'm like the famous one, the famous video. I'm like, oh, mate, no, come on, man. You can't do that. But then, so we put it on, and we're watching Richard Pryor, and then he paused it, and then he went, do you think Richard Pryor moves around a lot? And I went, yeah, he's up and down all the time. He went, no. He goes, watch it now. Now I've said that. And he played it. I'm like, fuck yeah. Richard Pryor moves around when he's telling the story, but as soon as he gets to the punchline, he stops dead. Drops the punchline. It goes boom. Then he's on the move. Drops the tag. Boom. Then another punchline, boom, and he's done that. But then he stops, and each time he does that, he stops dead. And I was like, fuck, that is impressive. Like Dave Allen. Dave Allen used to just sit there, and him flicking it's been well documented, it's been talked about in all of his books and things like that, and him flicking the lint off of his trousers or just picking at it, or while he's telling the story, you're just gripped. And you're like, that is what, to have that gravitas when you're telling that story is just, you can't teach it. It's just instinctual. It's in you. And I find all that fascinating. And the mechanics behind telling a joke or telling a story, I find fascinating. And I'm always looking at that. When I'm watching comedians, I'm not necessarily laughing my head off. I'll go, like most comics, you'll go, that is a good structured joke. That's funny. And that's why you couldn't gig to comedians, because we wouldn't laugh. But that doesn't mean we don't appreciate it. It doesn't mean we don't give a shit. It just means that we're like, that's a fucking good joke, that. Yeah, that's got everything there. It all works. There's no fat on that. This is this, that, and that. Yeah. So that's why you have to watch all these all the masters and go, yep. Even Bill Cosby, even though he ruined it by being a horrible sex offender, his early stuff, like the Ark, like Noah, is one of the best bits of comedy ever. That whole story is brilliant. No one had done that before. No one had broken down the story of Noah, because it'd always been Noah gets spoken to by God, and God goes, and Noah goes, "Oh yeah, all right, then I'll do that." They'd never spun it and gone, "What? What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And it really upsets me that Cosby went on to do the things that he did, because it's ruined. It's ruined some beautiful historical comedy moments. You know that they're just sullied by it now. You know, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You mentioned Dave Allen there, my absolute hero.
Yeah.
I recently thought about him. All these years I've been watching him, and I did fortunately manage to get to see him live one time at the Strand.
Jammy Git.
In about 91, and it was the most amazing. I remember two things about that gig. One, that Josh Sacklin from The Bill was in the audience.
No.
That's one. And the other one is that I came away from that show with just the biggest smile on my face, and I think it must have lasted a week because it was just phenomenal. And one thing that only recently struck me is that he was a prop comedian, and you mentioned it there because you got the glass to the side. You at one time you had a cigarette, at one time you had a scotch. Latterly it was a glass of water. He's got the lint. He's picking at his nails. These are props while he's being personable and telling the story. And your attention is diverted away a little bit, going, "Oh yeah, but there's a thing going on there. There's a thing going on there. No, glass of water." And then, but none of that is happening when he's delivering the punchline.
You're right. Now
he might even sit forward in his seat. He's using the seat as a prop now. He'll sit forward to deliver. And it's like he's doing props, but it's the subtlest prop comedy you've ever seen in your life.
That is it. Yeah, I've never thought of it like that, because then it's trying to portray that air of nonchalance, like you're kind of just telling a story. You're not worried about the fact that you're sat in front of a couple of hundred people or however many it was. You're just telling a story, and that's why things like a comedian leaning on the mic stand.
Yeah.
Or I've done it a couple of times. I'll be chatting and I'll take my jacket off and hang it on the thing, or take my hat off and hang it on the mic stand, or you kind of just doing stuff. I went on with a cup of tea once, and it was one of the best gigs I've ever had. I just had a cup of tea in a proper cup. I think I had a saucer as well, and I'm just going on. I'm like, and I'm chatting away. I'm like, yeah, I know, remember that? You know, pointing with the saucer and just So you're right. It's that it kind of lowers your guard a bit. You kind of it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? That by saying some the best things are the things that are unsaid.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to me. I remember doing, when I was with my ex-partner Jade, I remember doing her show, and I played a character called Pudding, and Pudding Pudding started off as me. I was moving the props around. I was supposed to be moving stuff around on stage.
Yeah.
And, it was based on those, like in the theatre where they wear black, like the stage hands, or moving stuff around.
Yeah.
So it came to that. So I had this black morph suit on, and I wasn't supposed to speak. And that taught me how to make people laugh. They couldn't see me, they couldn't hear me, and all I had was my physicality, and that's all I had. And it was a really good lesson in how to make people laugh without relying on the things that you normally rely on.
Yeah.
So things like that, like the lint, like moving in your chair, the glass of whiskey, that turned out to be champagne, didn't it? It was champagne. Yeah. I read that I can't remember which book it is, but it said it was champagne. All of that is so incredible. And again, you don't sit there going, I'm going to do that today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to add this. I'm going to add that. It just happens. It's instinctual. And I find that fascinating. And that's why I like Bob Newhart. When he's on the phone, he's doing he was the master of the one-sided conversation. And you knew what exactly he'd been asked, the questions that were coming at him, based on how he was saying, what he was replying with, what he was saying. When he did Sir Walter Riley and all of it, it's so clever to be able to do that by getting the point across, but without saying what the point is. It's incredible, and I will never tire of looking into it and finding out. I think it's fascinating.
You mentioned there when you're playing pudding, essentially the silent stage
Yeah.
hand. I'll tell you where my mind immediately went. Morecambe and Wise.
Oh yeah.
Brown coats on, moving the
Yeah.
scenery.
Yeah.
Think about Shirley Bassey classic Christmas special sketch,
Yep.
and they're working the crank handle and they're trying to be inconspicuous, but they're
That's
the most
it.
obvious thing in the set.
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's like that was, do you remember the plank?
Oh yeah.
Silent film.
Eric Sykes.
Yeah. With was it Tommy Cooper? It was. I think he did it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Because it was Eric Sykes. Was it Eric Sykes and Tommy Cooper? Or sorry, because Arthur Lowe did it. I can't remember who it was, but I think they did a couple of versions of it. But that, being able to like, the plank is hilarious, but they say nothing. But when you go back and see like Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd and all of those guys, like they said nothing, but they were hilarious.
Yeah, 100%.
And of course the classic Charlie Chaplin and just all relying on just their movements. Fascinating.
Yeah.
You know?
That's something else I was thinking about, and maybe you can shed some light on this. There's a classic trope of an Edinburgh show that about around the 40-minute mark, you have to be a bit somber and a bit, there's a tragedy, but it all works out. Here's the laugh at the end. And that made me think about Chaplin, because he had this incredible ability without words to make people laugh and cry.
Yeah.
In a 20-minute, a two-reeler, or a feature like the Kid. For his first feature, I mean, by today's standard, it's tiny, but it's so powerful. It's one of my favorite movies. Weirdly, it's the only one that really makes me cry. Still, I'm 50 years old. I still weep when I see the Kid. And I was like thinking, well, are we harking back now to lessons of many, many, many years ago, like a century ago, and thinking, oh, well, it's more powerful if you can make it a bit sad somewhere in the middle.
Well, I think,
does that ring true, do you think?
With Edinburgh, I don't know. I think Russell Kane was one of the first people to do what has now since become known as the Dead Dad story. And then having seen a few shows now up there, there's a tragedy, like someone's got cancer and they either came out the other side, or sadly someone passed away, and there is that tragedy at that bit. And I think in somewhere like Edinburgh, it's now become, you need a story, you need a proper story, proper show. Having been up there this year, and the last couple of years, I've tried to do it. I'm just doing a funny show, a straight show. It's not enough. People want that extra thing. They want to be taken on this, for want of a better phrase, they want to be taken on a journey. Sian Davis I saw up in Edinburgh. It's About Time. She even started sort of 10 minutes in, and she even referenced that. She goes about the sad bit.
Yeah.
And she did a sad bit in like sort of 10 minutes in. So messing with the formula, if you like, and then the sad bit at the 40-minute mark. I think a lot of it as well, because there is a structure to writing films that I've since found out about, because I'm writing a film with a friend of mine, Ren, and she went to the New York Film Academy, so she's writing some films, and we were just talking about an idea, and she just went, "Have you got any ideas?" And I gave her this idea. She went, "Right, this is a good idea. We're gonna work on this. It's on IMDb, so it's happening."
Mm-hmm.
So, for having worked with her and read books on the structure of a film, it's always the same. Like the characters meet, they go on a thing. Then there's that part of the film when all hope is lost. It's like, this is it. It's all over. We're done for. But then suddenly it all kicks in and go, actually, no, it's not the end. This has happened. And then there's a bit where they storm the castle, and then they're triumphant at the end. And that's the same structure for nearly every film that you've ever seen. And I think that's the same with Edinburgh shows. They have this, it builds up like, so this was my dad, and he did this, and he did that, and he was a great man, and he blah, 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 blah. But then sadly on this date, we found out he had cancer, and on that date, he passed away.
Yeah.
And that's your all hope is lost bit. And then that's at the 40-minute mark. And then the last 10 is them, the triumphant is like, all right, he's gone, but he taught me all these wonderful things and showed me what it is to be a better person. And I always want to be more like my dad, and blah, blah, blah. And that's the storm in the castle bit, the triumphant ending. And I think that's just how it's always been. And you can try and write a film that doesn't have that, but for some reason, sometimes they don't Every film you've seen, that even if you don't think he's got it, it's got it. Napoleon Dynamite is a perfect example of a film where you go, what the fuck? Why is this film doesn't... There's no reason for this film. It's just, you're plonked down in the town where they live and you're just seeing the people go about their day. And then you leave and it's still carrying on. Like, there wasn't any... do you know what I mean? But even then, when you look at it, really, there was the bit with Pedro, vote for Pedro, and then the love interest, and then there was the uncle, Rico, and then there were, even on that level, there was still elements of that structure still there.
Yeah.
And so I think because it's such a great, the formula works. It works every time. So, it's up to you what you do within that framework. But I think that's what's happened with the Edinburgh shows. It's kind of that framework works. And I think, and you do need something in Edinburgh or in festivals like that. Like everyone this year was ADHD or neurodiversity, or they had a show about a specific thing. I think going up to these places like I did with just a funny show about all manner of things, it just isn't enough. They want more. And I think it does follow that. I think it follows that same structure, like the movies. I think the Edinburgh show follows that same structure, which is really difficult to do for a comedy show.
Yeah, I like the fact that, and you mentioned one case there, is that people now are trying to not subvert it, but sort of make that concept, that structural format, part of the comedy of the show. Like I saw a show, I think it might have been in Leicester this year. Can't remember. I wish I could remember who it was. And my apologies if they hear this, that I don't remember who it was. But they started it with a timer to count down to get to the sad bit. I was like, this is brilliant. It's coming. We're 5 minutes away, guys. We're 5 minutes from the sad bit.
That's great.
I loved it. It was so clever, and it just literally taking that idea and then saying, well, let's make that much bigger thing from the start, from the outset, and just keep pointing at it.
That's it. You're trying to find your version of the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, you're still working within the framework. It's just that you're kind of showing people behind the curtain, going, right, you know what's going to happen. You've seen enough of these now. So this bit is going to be coming up. Richard Hardesty did a bit as well. He was talking about how to write the show is really difficult. He says, the end's got to go at the end, the beginning at the beginning. He goes, if you get those round the wrong way, and then he did a bit, and you go, it don't make sense, does it? It doesn't make sense. And I when I was doing a preview of my latest show, when I was at MacFest in Machynlleth in Wales, and I got into a bit of material. I was sort of 20 minutes in, and I got into a bit of material, and I went, oh no, and I've got the recording. I stopped the show and I go, wait, I can't get into this bit because this thing goes into the really good joke, and this really good joke needs to go at the end. So I just need you to just bear with until the end. And this is a really good joke, and I know you're going to like it. It's just that it needs to go at the end. So I'm going to have to stop this bit of material, go on with another bit, and then when I got to that bit, I remember I'd said to was it someone in the front row with my partner, Kate. And I just went, how long have I done? And they went, you've got 5 minutes. I went, oh shit, I need to do the funny joke. And then went into it. And so people they were ready for it. So yeah, when you can do it, it's funny. It is funny. And I'd like to do more of that, I think.
Yeah.
Subvert it a bit. Yeah. It's a great concept. Great idea. Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned earlier on about, pacing and not wanting to make phone calls, and it's very much like myself, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've said on this podcast before that I walk around for 2 hours just before doing the interview. This is the easy part.
Really?
Because you're doing the comedy. Yeah, I get super nervous. I'll be honest, it's very much easier to talk to you, though.
I was going to say, because we know each other, so that must sort of take the edge off a bit. So
yeah, I only pace for 1 hour before.
Just wear out one pair of shoes.
Yeah. I have to walk around one circle and then I have to go out the other way to wear the other shoe out. Keep it even. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So anxiety is the question. Now, obviously you've mentioned about it. Are you now as nervous before going on stage now as you were 10, 12, 18 years ago?
There's still nerves. I think you have to have them. I think it's important because I found if I'm too confident before a gig, if I'm too calm, I don't tend to have as good a gig. If I'm like, this is fine, I tend to, it's not as good. but a little bit of apprehension doesn't hurt. And I don't. It's not like it used to be. When I first started, that first gig. There was a woman sat in the front row. I was at the side of the stage. I was pacing up and down, and a woman, she leaned over and she went, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, I am absolutely shitting myself. And she just went, "Yeah, I can see." She goes, "You're going to have a heart attack. You need to chill out a little bit." And I was glugging vodka Red Bulls. She's like, "You're gonna die, mate. You need to chill out." Because I was so petrified of doing it kept me awake. That's how nervous I was about it. I couldn't. It was awful. And as you go on, I remember the turning point for me was, again, Marilyn, that I mentioned earlier. She booked me because she was running up the creek in Croydon. She booked me for a corporate for B&Q, and she just went, "Right, you're going to MC it." I went, I'd never MC'd in my life. I was like, "What are you talking about?" She went, "You're going to MC it, and you're going to smash it, and stop mucking around. You're going to have to do it." Because of that pressure, I remember being on, and it just worked. It just worked. And I remember looking at her, and she could just see my eyes were all big, and I'm like, fucking hell, it's working. It's one of the best gigs I've ever done. And that's how I got into comparing work. That's how I got into MCing.
Yeah.
But that was the turning point. When you have that first gig like that, and you go, "Oh, I can do it. Oh, okay. That's," and that kind of spurs you on, gives you a bit more confidence. But now, it's more like, is this going to be the one where I eat shit? Am I going to eat shit tonight? Because that's going to happen to every comedian you've ever heard of, down the ages, every single one, through the passages of time. They've all died on their arse, and they will die on their arse again. It's just that the gaps in between the deaths become longer. If you're any good at it, you're always round the corner is a death. And when it happens, you get better at handling it now, because you kind of go, "Look, I know I can do it. I know this material works. Something's gone on tonight. They don't like me, or it just isn't. I'm not delivering it right. There's something off with my chemistry. We're not gelling as a group, and so it's off." But I get you know what? I get nervous if it's a gig I've not done before, or if it's quite a rowdy gig. I'm like, because I know, because of what I sound like, very easy for me. When it's a rowdy gig, it's very easy for me to slip into that and get a little bit laddie and like, and I don't want to do that. I want to just have a laugh, and so I get a bit on edge about that. It's not necessarily nerves. I can do it. I know I can do it now. It's like imposter syndrome comes up all the time. People talk about that, and you go, yeah. For a good few years, there's a bit of you going, any minute now, someone's going to come up and say, "You're not doing it anymore. You've been getting away with this." But it was Simon, Big Simon at the Comedy Store, and he said to me, it was a Thursday night. I'd only done the Comedy Store a couple of times, and I went out and I was a bit nervous because it's the Comedy Store. So, everyone wants to do the Comedy Store. That's like your mecca. Like, if I get to play the Comedy Store, this is amazing. And so I got the first act on, and I went in the green room, and he came through, and I remember him saying, he goes, "Rich, right, we haven't booked you as a favour, right? No one's doing charity work here. We have booked you because you can do this. We've booked you because you're good at it. You're good enough to play the Comedy Store. Stop fucking around and get on with it." And I went, "Oh yeah," because he could see I was nervous, and it just a switch went on like that. I went, "Yeah, people aren't doing you a favour by booking you. They book you because they know you can do the job." And so that just changed everything. And now I'm 18 years in, and I'm like, "Yeah, I've earned my place. I'm not, I don't feel, I'm not arrogant, but it's not imposter syndrome anymore. I'm like, oh, no. I have the things I've gone through to get where I am. I've earned all that. So the nerves have kind of settled. I don't really get, it's not nervous, but it's apprehension. Am I going to eat shit tonight? That's more like it.
Have you had a night where you just died on your ass, but managed to come away thinking, "I've learned something important"?
Every death is a lesson. You get more from it's been said a million times, I imagine, but you get more from the bad ones than the good ones.
Right.
It's when you first start out and you die, you think you're the only one that's ever died, and no one knows how to talk to you in the green room. Everyone's a bit, you're always in your head. They think you're a prick. You're like, everyone hates me. I just need to go home. But really, if you come off and just go, "Fucking hell, did you see that? That was awful." have a laugh about it. People go, yeah, it was awful. But that just comes with time, you know. With every single gig, you come away going, that could have been better. I could have handled that more. That's why when people heckle you and you come back with a zinger and you go boom, right, and it just smashes the room, and people go, wow, how did he do that? That was off the top of his head. They don't realise that a year before, a very similar heckle came your way and you didn't know how to handle it, but you were driving home and you went, I should have said that. And then a year later, someone else did it and you go, boom, and they go, genius. You've been sitting on that for a year. So you learn something from every gig. If you're really interested in it, you learn something from every gig, good or bad. And having really good death stories is what comedians want. That will bond you in a green room. That will bring you all together. That will get more respect out of your fellow comedians than you going, I'll roof that. Oh yeah, I'll roof that. If you go, fucking hell, I was in Guildford the other day. They were throwing chairs at me and they were doing this, doing that. You know, that's a better story. Having a good death story is brilliant.
I saw a show at Edinburgh Festival. I can't remember when, again, like most things, I can't remember when it was or who it was, but there was a show called, I think it was Comedy Death or something.
Right.
Basically, it was a, you might be aware of this. It was a host brought on 4 or 5 people and said, just tell us about your worst day on stage, the day you died. It was just fascinating stories.
I love it. Exactly. No one wants to hear about when you got carried out of the room on the shoulders of the audience. They want to hear about the time you had to leave through the back door. You know, that's what you want to hear about.
You can hear the second part of this interview with Rich Wilson in the next episode, cleverly entitled Rich Wilson Part 2. I love talking to the people in and around comedy, and I hope if you're listening to this, that you like listening to what they have to say as much as I do. So until the next episode, please like, comment, subscribe, rate and share. Until then, thanks for listening.